The title of Lecture 4 is Spiritual Healing. Selected answers by Ambrose Worrall to questions from the audience will follow the lecture.
Let us talk about healing. Very short subject, very long dissertation. Well, everybody knows what healing is. In order to discuss it, we have to divide it up into different categories. The first one I call medicinal healing. That's the regular healing that you get when you go to the doctor and he gives you the pink pills for pale people and so on and so forth. Medicinal healing. Then there's mental healing and psychic or spirit healing, and of course spiritual healing. It should be noted that in most cases healing could be the result of activities in all of these categories. You can't cut it off with a pair of scissors and say it belongs there or there, there or there, because many of these things overlap. More enlightened members of healing disciplines are well aware of the hidden forces at work in the curing of disease. Listen to the words of a prominent physician in New York City specializing in psychiatry and neurology. This is what he has to say. When is healing psychic or supernormal? One might say always. For in one sense, no healing takes place except as an activity of uncomprehended natural forces. The doctor but applies the bandages and God does the healing beneath them. Now this is a physician talking. When is healing accomplished by spirit agencies? Or when does it employ parapsychological effects and phenomena not recognized nor utilized by orthodox medical science? If the following requirements were met, the cure should be acceptable as psychic or spirit healing to the medical profession. 1. An appropriate case scientifically diagnosed. 2. Failure of the best orthodox medical and psychiatric treatment to cure. 3. Application of strictly psychic or spirit healing methods involving psychical phenomena such as clairvoyance, transmediumship, and control. Cure of the patient to the satisfaction of expert medical scrutiny. 5. Identification of the spirit agencies involved by corroboration of names, addresses, facts, and information supplied by the spirit agencies, and perhaps by cross-references and independent mediumistic sources. Now these are strange words from a medical man, aren't they? He just happened to be also somewhat psychic himself, because we knew him very well. Such tests as these will not satisfy the materialistically minded scientist. This can hardly be expected. For the most part, he is unacquainted with or wholly skeptical of the rich background of parapsychological facts indicating a spiritual realm of knowledge. The mystic dictum seems true, that to each in his own time the Spirit of truth will come. Spiritual knowledge may indeed require spiritual discernment. After 150 years of successful emphasis on physical science with man's psychical discerning faculties unemployed, it may be a long time before there is an emphasis on psychical science and a general acceptance of the statements of St. Paul, you have a natural body and a spiritual body. The things that are visible are temporal, and the things that are invisible are eternal. And you like to have a psychiatrist like that? He knows what he's talking about. And he sees the danger of speaking out like this, where he says, for my use of the word spirit, I expect to be spoken of as courageous, but really being anachronistic or sub-scientific by some colleagues. Pertinent scientific events have been happening so rapidly in our modern world that no adequate philosophy of mind has been written. You're the man who earns his living as a psychiatrist. There's no adequate philosophy of the mind has been written. The scientific student of mind eagerly follows the trail pursued in the field of physical events by the scientific student of matter. The psychologist tried to prove that all mind and purpose was matter, merely some kind of organization of activities that goes on within the physical brain. While searching for some way to support that contention, he finds that the physicist in recent decades has moved on in his search for reality and arrived at a conviction that the reality in matter is essentially mind. This is one of the strangest spectacles that the history of mankind affords. The old materialistic physics, which sought to eliminate mind and purpose from the universe by showing that physical events can be otherwise completely accounted for, is now practically obsolete. The whole vast realm with which science deals finds its rational order and meaning in the knowing activity of mind. So far from being a curious, sensitive substance present in a small corner of the brain, or even an activity of the nervous system, mind seems to be a unique something extended in time and space. The now popular dichotomy of mind and body is insufficient, almost meaningless, for something is missing. Reason, feeling, and purpose compose a marvelous unity of function, and we may soon be obliged to reintroduce the word spirit if we are to be 20th century up-to-date and realistic. Just a few decades ago, the word was criticized as a hopeless anachronism, but now it is a word that moderns must face up to again, even the sophisticated men of science. Now, that's a lot for a psychiatrist to say, especially as a member of the medical association. Now, because spiritual healing is commonly associated with the use of the hands, we should review briefly some of the systems which have been publicized over recent years and which involve the use of the hands. On the list here. However, we should not lose sight of the fact that healing by prayer without the use of the hands is also a form of spiritual healing, and apparently just as effective as in the laying on of hands. Chirotherapy is a word which some people may not be familiar with, but it means the treatment of disease or disorders by the use of the hands. It is as old as history itself. In the broadest sense, its meaning covers all methods of treatment from chirophany, which is the symbolic extension of the hands in bestowing blessings, to the specific adjustments of joints as in chiropractic. All of these things are healing methods using the hands. When did it all start? The natural instinctive action of squeezing an injury to reduce pain or rubbing any part of the body to restore ease is chirotherapy in its original form. You back your shin against something, you reach down right away and grab it with your hand, don't you? You're doing a little of a laying on of hands. The child falls down and bumps his head and the mother kisses it. That's another form of healing by contact, but using the lips instead of the hands. There are many systems of pressure techniques that have been developed over the years. Treatment of tender areas produces a counter-irritation which is reflex to the organ which is reflecting the pain or tenderness, and often results in curing the disease. Kind of fighting pain with pain. Now, this produced research into the study of reflexes, and the name reflexology came into use. Reflex points are found in many places of the body, even inside the mouth and nose. How the beneficial results are obtained is not understood, but it could be that a spiritual healing current is entirely responsible for the cures. The doctor takes a hold of your tongue and squeezes it and you get cured of some throat ailment. Sounds very strange, doesn't it? But it happens. Or he takes a probe and presses up inside your nose and presses on a certain tender spot at the back of the nose, and you get cured of some other disease. And out of all this came another thing called zone therapy. This is rather recent as far as healing things are concerned. Goes back to the early part of this century. It's defined as the science of relieving pain and curing disease by pressures in various zones affected by pain or disease. In zone therapy, the body is divided longitudinally into 10 zones. You can just think of 10 lines, 5 on each side of the median line. These lines would be in the center of those zones. They start off in the thumb and the fingers at the tips, go right up through the body to the head and back all the way down to the toes. The first zone, as an example, extends from the great toe to the entire height of the body, including the chest and back, and down the arm and the thumb. Now, you'll notice that all of these points seem to be on the surface of the body, skin, either mucous membranes like the inside of the mouth or on the outer skin, the epidermis. Apparently, strange currents are flowing on the outside of the skin. Now, these people divided the tongue into 10 different zones. Pressures on the tongue affects other areas throughout the body. And pressure on the tip of the great toe or thumb affects all of zone 1 throughout the body. In other words, you have a pain anywhere in zone 1, squeeze your big toe or squeeze your thumb. There's all kinds of records of cures that have been affected by this method. Sometimes it doesn't work. They don't know why it works, and they don't know why it doesn't work sometimes, just like medicine. It is claimed that all pathological conditions can at least be relieved, and a large portion can be cured by zone therapy. Pressures average 1/2 minute to as much as 4 minutes, and in some cases as long as 20 minutes on a single press. The maximum pressures vary from 2 to 10 pounds. In other words, it's not a really light pressure. Of course, they have a theory. And the modern theory is that crystalline deposits form at the nerve endings. These keep the electrical contact or impulse of the nerves from grounding. In other words, the crystalline deposit acts as insulators. In the treatment, the squeezing, the deposits are broken up, enabling proper grounding of the nerve endings and the increase in blood circulation. And everybody remembers Dr. Locke up in Canada. This Canadian medical doctor became famous for the cures of many diseases by the simple process of foot manipulation. This adjustment, known as the Locke brake, relieved pressures on the posterior tibial nerve and, seeming miracles, place. Story I read once about this gentleman. He just sat down in the middle of the circle. All the crowds were around. They threw the dollar in the hat, and he took the shoes off and had their foot yanked and went on the way. Didn't keep any books, I understand. He didn't have time. But you know, it really worked, and he became famous. Now you see a word of prayer which may be unfamiliar to some of you, and that's shiatsu. How many know about shiatsu? There's about 2 of you. Well, the word shiatsu is composed of 2 parts. Shi meaning fingers, and atsu meaning pressure. It describes in one word a Japanese method of treating illness with digital compression. Tokajiro Namikoshi, founder of the Nippon Shiatsu school, developed a system which he describes as a science, the basis of which is pure instinct. That's a good description, isn't it? He concludes, after 40 years of study and research, that the heart of shiatsu is like pure maternal affection. The pressure of the hands causes the springs of life to flow. That's the laying on of hands, isn't it? We could paraphrase this beautiful Oriental expression and apply it to the method used in our healing services in the New Life Clinic by saying the laying on of hands with pure love causes the health-restoring springs of life to flow. But the Japanese Ministry of Welfare gave an official description of shiatsu, and they said it's a treatment in which the thumbs and palms of the hands are used to apply pressure to certain points in order to correct irregularities of the living body, maintain or improve health, and contribute to the cure of certain illnesses. Now, you notice it didn't say a thing about the fingers in there, but if you make a study of it, you'll find that the fingers are used. They use the balls of the thumbs, the palms of the hands, and they use these 3 fingers. Especially on the face and the abdomen is where they use the fingers. Now, over these 40 years, they have discovered a lot of pressure points. Now, we have about 450 muscles in the body which allow us to move things around. The pressure points of shiatsu are over the length of these muscles. It is claimed that the digital pressure causes 80% of accumulated lactic acid to reconvert into glycogen. This eliminates fatigue, and with it, improper muscular contraction, the cause of illness. Well, he's just talking there about tension, isn't he? And more illness caused by tension in the world than by anything else. So they are eliminating tension by shiatsu. Yet I believe that much of the success of shiatsu stems from the flow of spiritual healing current through the hands of the shiatsu specialist. So we may not recognize the presence of this subtle factor in his work. Now, acupuncture, everybody knows about acupuncture. There's a book written about it, several books in fact. It's a name given to the original Chinese practice of puncturing the human body with special needles, usually made of gold or silver, to cure disease. The prefix acu means with a needle. A doctor friend of ours witnessed some of this work, and when the cure was effective, the needles just dropped out. In other words, they were standing up straight in the skin. They don't stick the needles in very far, just pierce the skin with them. And here the needle standing up straight. After a while, the trouble disappears and the needles just drop right out. Makes you wonder how it works, doesn't it? Now these good Chinese doctors have been experimenting with acupuncture for many, many centuries. And they have discovered about 800 different points. And these are covered by various authorities who have done clinical work with these needles. When a needle is inserted at any particular point, beneficial results may be obtained at a number of different locations. In other words, one point could cure disease in any number of different locations. There's an enormous amount of clinical data accumulated over the centuries. These data have been compiled into a reference work known as Chinese formulary, which can be consulted for treatment. Certain associated acupuncture points used simultaneously have given such consistently good results in certain illnesses over the centuries that their use has become standard practice in treatment of these diseases, although the precise mode of action is not known. In Chinese cosmology, we learn about the yin and the yang. These are respectively the feminine passive principle, such as darkness, cold, or wetness, and the masculine active principle, such as light, heat, or dryness. Kind of a positive and a negative of things. And these yin and yang are what nature uses in combination to produce everything that is. Nothing exists without the yin and the yang, and nothing exists without the positive and the negative, as we say it in the Western world. In acupuncture, we find yin applied to points serving the solid organs of the body, and yang applied to points serving the hollow organs of the body. There are also many other ways of classifying the various meridians along which acupuncture points lie. These meridians, if traced in lines over the body, are not straight lines as they are in zone therapy, but they wind all over the body in various patterns. Whether yin or yang, all organic rhythms are interconnected at skin level. And at skin level, it is possible to control changes in the energy levels or patterns of all other organs, the skin being an organ of the body, in case you're not familiar with that term. Although it is not known how acupuncture works, there is no doubt about beneficial results obtained over the centuries by this method. It is possible that the inserted needles pick up energies from or discharge energies into the electric energy field surrounding the human body, thus restoring the balance of health. The spiritual healer seems to perform a similar function. Now, we're all familiar with sound. We just had some more evidence of the effect of sound down at the Civic Center, according to the radio, where the rock music once again drove some people crazy, and they had to be arrested. It takes a long time before people learn these things, but someday they will. And when we speak of sound, we naturally think of those frequencies that come under the description of audio waves. The waves the normal human ear can hear. In other words, we are referring to mechanical radiant energy that is transmitted by longitudinal pressure waves in the air and is the objective cause of hearing. Again, we find a pressure technique involved. The pressure of those waves makes it possible for you to hear. But these pressures affect more than the ears, as we shall see a little later. Light therapy has been used for many years. They have used different colored lights on people and gotten certain beneficial effects. What is light? Light is that which makes vision possible. It is a sensation aroused by stimulation of the visual receptors. In other words, the nerve endings in the retina of the eye. However, there are people that can see with their fingers. Well, evidently, light waves can be registered in other places besides the retina of the eye. Now, what is seen is usually reflected light from an object. And these reflections can have widely different psychological and physical effects upon a person depending on the subject matter. Everybody doesn't like to look at the same picture. And some pictures convey one thing to a person. To another person, the same picture conveys something entirely different. Some psychological tests that are based on this fact. First, one can be subjected to soothing, irritating, or shocking influences just through light. Now, light is electromagnetic radiation traveling in a vacuum at a speed of about 186,281 miles per second, moving along at a pretty good rate. A photon is the unit of intensity of light at the retina. It represents an extremely small amount of energy. In fact, it takes several photons of light before a person registers anything in his mind. So when these photons are present in large enough numbers at the proper wavelengths, they can exert pressures that can bring about measurable physiological changes. Now let's talk about mental healing. Mental healing is sometimes confused with spiritual healing. The following cases describe mental healing. And you can see when I describe these cases that they could easily be mistaken for spiritual healing. However, any qualified psychiatrist could cure these same diseases by medical methods. Here's the first case. After several months of severe headaches, a young woman of 26 lost the sight of her right eye and then of her left, so that within 1 week she was totally blind. She was admitted to the New York Neurological Institute. There the consulting ophthalmologist confirmed complete loss of vision. After several psychiatric interviews, She was told that if she really wished to, she could see again. That she had the power to turn on her eyesight just as she had the power to turn on the electric light above her chair. The light switch was put into her hand. She was told she must not turn on the light unless she was sure that she really wished to see. She paused 1 full minute, turned the switch, and exclaimed with astonishment, "I see my hands. I see everything." About the same time, another young woman was admitted to the hospital with violent, one-sided convulsive seizures, which occurred almost daily. Some briefly, but one, while the patient was under observation in the hospital, persisted for 30 consecutive hours. The arm and leg jerks were so severe that at times she was almost thrown from her bed. For 4 years she had been treated unsuccessfully with anti-epileptic medication. At a large conference of the hospital staff, some of the doctors present believed the seizures to be due to structural brain disease. After several separated hours of psychological exploration, the patient was completely cured. She never again had a convulsive attack. Now remember, they tried medicine for 4 years, didn't have any results whatsoever. It was in the mind. Now, to many people, such cures may appear as miracles or evidence of psychic or spirit healing. However, they are not. The first patient, Miss M, was one of 8 children. She lived on a farm 14 miles from the nearest town. She was aged 13 when her mother died, but the care of her 3 younger children, depended wholly upon her. At first, the older children managed the house for her father, but within 3 years, they all married and left. Miss M at 16 was alone to do all the cooking, scrubbing, sweeping, sewing, in fact, all the work of the house and some of the farm. She had no organic neurological abnormalities, and psychological exploration revealed the blindness to be desired. She wanted to be blind. She's shutting out things. Her inability to see had fulfilled an unconscious wish to obtain relief from drudgery and have the rest and attention she had experienced during 3 weeks of the previous summer when she was confined to bed for a heart or stomach ailment. An added significance of the blindness was relief from the sight of her farm existence and the face of a tyrannical father. The desire to run away long had been in conflict with her stern conscience and sense of duty to her young sisters, to whom she was devoted. The blindness, in a poor way, resolved that conflict. When through brief analysis she became aware that her intolerable home situation might be dealt with in a better way than being blind and helpless, she was willing to give up her blindness. Both the blindness and the convulsions were symptoms of hysteria. Such cases provide the most persuasive imitations of supernormal psychic or miraculous cures. Hysterical symptoms abound in neuropsychiatric practice. They are especially numerous in wartime. All kinds of cases. I got some more cases there, but I won't go into them. Now, everybody's heard about psychic healing. Many people want to know what the difference is between mental healing and psychic healing and spiritual healing and so on. There's a lot of cases in medical history of psychic healing. Everybody, I think, has probably heard of Professor James H. Hislop. He was a great man investigating the psychical side of life. And before his death in 1920, he came to the conclusion that many psychotic, psychopathic, and neurotic persons were psychic sensitives and they could become the victims of spirit influence and spirit obsession. He persuaded Dr. Worrall to carry on the work they had begun together of attempting to cure intractable cases not responding to orthodox medical or psychiatric therapy. Here is such a case. Mr. C.E. was 49 years old. He looked much older and talked and acted in a demented manner. He was unable to concentrate enough to reply to questions. He babbled ceaselessly and incoherently about paintings and inventions. He could supply no life story. This had to be pieced together from facts first revealed by Mrs. Duke, a clairvoyant and trance medium who assisted Dr. Bull. Confirmation of the facts came much later from the patient, including verification of the names of many of his relatives divined by Mrs. Duke. At the age of 11, epileptic attacks had commenced, which recurred periodically for several years. When they ceased, the patient continued to be morose and seclusive throughout adolescence, with his mind preoccupied by sex fantasies. Someone gave him a Ouija board. He worked with this and received messages. Later, he became engrossed with automatic writing. Then followed a long period through which he automatically drew grotesque creatures, the products of his hallucination. Presently, he seemed to be controlled by discarnate personalities. One who gave his name as Joseph Seleny supplied a biographical sketch of his life. Seleny had been a prominent artist in Vienna who died insane. Subsequent research at the New York Public Library corroborated many of the facts communicated by Seleny. 8 obsessing personalities were differentiated. They were a strangely curious group. These spirit entities were allowed to control the medium, Mrs. Duke, in the course of 39 separate sittings. The individual spirits, when in control of the medium, behaved in characteristic ways, each contributing activity and mannerisms which combined to make the total symptomology of the patient. In other words, you took all these separate entities, you put all the bits and pieces together, then you had what the patient was exhibiting through his mind. Dr. Bull talked with these controls one by one, and by discussion, persuasion, and command, and with help from his identified spirit guides or collaborators, was able to dispel these obsessing, discarnate persons. As each was persuaded to depart, the patient improves in the specific symptoms associated with that particular influence. Now just remember, these are medical men that are telling this. Mr. C.E., freed at last, was well, normal, and agreed in conversation, considerate, and interested in others. He became a very agreeable fellow. Couldn't make any sense before at all. He was formerly egotistic and self-centered. He was now sympathetic with other patients, and interested in their recovery. He talked less, but in conversation became fully coherent. He was grateful and appreciative of what had been done for him and followed medical directions for maintaining his newfound mental and physical adjustment. Before the treatment, he had lacked the will and seemingly even the intelligence to obey instructions. Now that is the case of psychic healing, where we use a medium and spirit entities in the other world to cure the patient still embodied in the flesh by freeing him of what the Bible used to call demons. In other words, possessing or obsessing entities. Here's another example of psychic healing. It's a case supplied by Dr. Elwood Worcester, which shows his method of handling a victim of apparent spirit possession. Mrs. A had been a morphine addict for several years when she sought help from Dr. Worcester. He treated her by gradually reducing her daily intake. In 1 month, the dose was reduced from 20 to 2 grams daily. At the end of the next month, morphine was discontinued entirely. He gained weight, acquired normal mental activity, and looked 15 years younger. A complete cure had apparently been effected. Mrs. A had experienced a series of brilliant morphine hallucinations, and after her apparent cure, she agreed to record them from memory for Dr. Worcester. The patient returned in 12 days, and Dr. Worcester was shocked to find her appearance worse than it had been at the beginning of the treatment. Most puzzling of all, her right arm was completely paralyzed. She told him that although she had taken no morphine, the hallucinations had returned and tormented her day and night. As soon as he had finished writing the account he had requested of her, the right arm had dropped helpless to her side. Her principal hallucination was the vaguely familiar figure of a man who stood before her holding out a syringe and bottle, urging her to return to her former practices. He wanted to take a little more morphine. Dr. Worcester found that she was a good hypnotic subject, but his commands to her in deep hypnosis to lift her arm met with no response. Neither suggestion nor prayer helped her. Sounds pretty hopeless, doesn't it? One day during treatment, Dr. Worcester heard a rapping from his desk, which was 6 or 7 feet away from where his patient was sitting. Mrs. A told him she often heard similar raps at home. Dr. Worcester then decided to try an experiment. He arranged to bring into the case a gifted private medium. This medium divined, among other things, that a spirit personality named Dr. Harris was responsible for Mrs. A's hallucinations and for the paralysis of her right arm. During one sitting, the patient developed trance and was controlled by a spirit who gave his name as Dr. Parker. This control, Parker, told Dr. Worcester that Mrs. A had always been mediumistic, though she did not know it. Parker explained that when Mrs. A was writing the report of her morphine illness and hallucinations, she had fallen into trance. Now remember, she's just writing her experiences and she goes into a trance. That should tell you something. She was tuning into the condition which had told of her before, and she became a part of it. Anyway, she falls into trance, and a spirit named Harris took control of her. In order to prove his power over her, he had deprived her of the use of her right arm. At this moment, the hitherto paralyzed arm was raised, and the communicating Dr. Parker shook hands with Dr. Worcester. This control, Parker told Dr. Worcester that Mrs. A had always been mediumistic, though she did not know it. Parker explained that when Mrs. A was writing the report of her morphine illness and hallucinations, she had fallen into trance. Now remember, she's just writing her experiences and she goes into a trance. That should tell you something. She was tuning in to the condition which had thought of her before, and she became a part of it. Well, anyway, she falls into trance, and a spirit named Harris took control of her. In order to prove his power over her, he had deprived her of the use of her right arm. At this moment, the hitherto paralyzed arm was raised, and the communicating Dr. Parker shook hands with Dr. Worcester and stated that he would deal with Harris and that Mrs. A would need no further treatment. Now here's a patient in a trance, and some spirit gives his name, Dr. Parker. He shakes hands with the patient's doctor and says, I'll take care of this other character. She doesn't need no more treatment. Now, this must be a terrible shock to a medical doctor, I can assure you. On awakening from trance, Mrs. A was surprised and gratified to find that she had recovered the use of her right arm. Dr. Worcester asked her if she knew anything of Harris. The patient told him that there had been a doctor named Harris who, before his death, had lived in her neighborhood and had taught her to use morphine. After this curious episode, Dr. Worcester continued to see Mrs. A twice a week for 6 weeks until he was convinced that her apparent cure was permanent. Mrs. A was not cured by faith, by prayer, nor by psychoanalysis, nor any other orthodox medical technique. Although a good hypnotic subject, Mrs. A failed to get relief from the paralysis by hypnotic suggestion. The spirit agency, Dr. Parker, succeeded in moving the paralyzed arm and removing the obsessing entity Harris, as he said he would. The arm remains well, and the hallucination and morphine craving did not recur. Now these are cases of psychic healing, where the use of disembodied spirits, who are just as real as you are, came to the rescue of a patient, and she was cured. Now we're going to talk about healing, what I call on the individual level, which is the thing most people are interested in. Generally speaking, there are two broad categories covering the field of healing. There is the treatment of the masses, as in prayers for world peace. Not very effective, apparently. Or for some particular country's inhabitants, or for those caught in a major disaster area. This type of prayer is quite common in churches. Physicians are also involved in treating the masses through vaccination, inoculation, and other treatments during epidemics. The other category which we are going to discuss in this session is treatment of the individual, which also involves both spiritual healers and the members of the various healing professions. Practically impossible to separate the two. Spiritual healing is supplementary treatment. A supplement is something added to supply omissions or to make complete. like taking vitamins to supplement a deficient diet. This definition clearly indicates that there is no need to eliminate treatment by the established healing physicians while receiving spiritual healing aid. Almost without exception, those who seek help from a spiritual healer are already under the care of a physician, and both the patient and the spiritual healer should accept this professional help. Individuality emphasizes the existence of a distinct personality, and we can be almost certain that no two persons visiting a spiritual healer will exhibit the same characteristics. The same thing applies to patients treated in absentia. Each one is a different personality from the other. As a matter of fact, they're not the same 2 days together. The degree of success in spiritual healing is governed by what is called conditions. This is a broad term covering all the prerequisites essential to the manifestation of healing in the patient. Obviously then, conditions are of great importance to the spiritual healer and the patient. The success of a surgical operation depends to a large extent on the conditions in the operating room. This includes not only the room and its equipment, but the doctors, nurses, technicians, and last but not least, the patient. Thus, the spiritual healer and the practicing physician have something in common. They both have to ensure the best conditions for successful treatment of the patient. Prepare the patient for surgery. That wouldn't surprise anyone to hear that in the hospital. But if you would go to church to a healing service and somebody says, prepare the patient for spiritual healing, everybody would look around and say, what are you talking about? They would be amazed. But it's just as essential to prepare a patient for spiritual healing as it is to prepare one for surgery. And preparation of the patient is one of the ways of providing good conditions. And we should see that this is done. We have all heard the old saying, cleanliness is next to godliness. And in all types of healing, clean conditions must be provided because God is involved in the healing process. Surgeon prepares himself by seeing that no pathogenic microorganisms can be transferred from himself to the patient. The spiritual healer should likewise prepare himself if he wishes the healing streams to flow through him unadulterated. There are some people who prefer not to use the simple three-letter word God. I've mentioned this before. And I can understand it. They are confused by the theological definition of that being. It doesn't make sense to them. For those who don't like to spell G-O-D, I've always suggested they spell L-A-W, which is the same thing, and will appeal to the mathematically minded. G-O-D equals L-A-W. Before concentrating on problems peculiar to spiritual healers per se, we should note that the regular professional healing physicians and nurses are in ideal positions to practice and incorporate spiritual healing with their regular work. And we know doctors that are doing this. So they don't tell the AMA. They do it sub rosa. We had one friend that attended our sessions at Gettysburg, medical doctor, back in August 1971. He wrote a letter. And in it he said, I have never felt that science was irreligious. And I've always felt that all healing comes from the God power within. perhaps a little aided by doctors, but basically from the God force. In time, these will be brought together and there will be unity of thought and action. This is a surgeon talking. His letters in the file downstairs. He commented on the mind. He said, I have always felt that people, even without realizing it, read the emotion content of others' minds, even while anesthetized in the operating room. Here he's saying that the person is under the influence of an anesthetic, and apparently dead to the world as far as sense is concerned, but they are reading the doctor's mind. That's exactly what he's saying. I felt this so much in Gettysburg, as though our minds were open books, and there was so much material exchanged that was never spoken. You ever think of that? You're listening to me, he was listening to me, and he said there was so much material exchange between the minds that was never spoken. Gives you something to think about. It's not unusual for doctors and nurses to witness unexpected recoveries from the ravages of disease or extensive injury, sometimes calling them miracles, recognizing that some higher power was responsible, and perhaps someone specially gifted was in part involved in the mysterious process. And here we have this doctor, same letter. I have been blessed with a little of the healing gift which for a long time I didn't recognize. Then in 1969 and 1970 there were 3 miraculous healings which forced me to wake up. Since then I have been casting about, trying to gain understanding and to develop my personal life to a point of worthiness. I worked too hard at it, was all wrapped up, and things then stopped happening. I really did not know where to turn, and I was discouraged. The non-verbal balm and spoken instruction which you gave, especially your 4th workshop on deep silence, turning within, and your conception of the divine, really helped straighten me out. You showed me how I can use the gift in my practice, and I feel happy and whole again. In my first week back at work, 2 major operations came off perfectly with very accelerated post-op recoveries. One lady with gram-negative septicemia, that's blood poisoning, and no blood pressure for 12 hours, almost overnight became completely well, and a lady with uncontrollable seizures all night long suddenly stopped, woke up, and was entirely normal. I rejoice in it. I give thanks. I cry, how wonderful God is, if we will just turn to him and believe. This is a surgeon who wrote this. In all cases of healing, we can picture a living trinity consisting of the healer, the healer, and the healee. The healer is God, or law if you prefer it that way. The healer is the physician, the nurse, or the spiritual healer, and the healee is the patient. We can, in addition to the living trinity of the healer, and healee, visualize a regulating trinity consisting of current, pressure, and resistance. Current means healing current. Pressure is the force that makes the healing current flow, and resistance is a property of the conductors through which the healing current flows. Combining the living and regulating trinities, we have the healer, providing healing current in accordance to demand at a constant pressure, the healer acting as a lower resistance conductor, and the healee acting usually as a higher resistance conductor. Healing power is the rate at which spiritual healing work is done. Some work is done in forcing the healing current through the healer, and there is a drop in the pressure. So less healing power is available to do the work as the healing current passes through the healee. In other words, just like the power going through the wires, there's not as much juice at the bulb as there is at the switch, because there's a little resistance in the wire. And as the power flows from God, if you have resistance, you reduce the amount of power available for healing. So it's obvious that the less resistance encountered in the healer, the more power is available for work on the healee. And the lower the resistance in the healee, the more effective will be the healing current. That's why they say if you have the faith of a little child, you have no resistance, you see. Little children usually respond very rapidly to spiritual healing. So it is clear now that what is referred to as conditions for healing involves resistance to the flow of the healing current. And to improve conditions, the spiritual healer must reduce resistance. Now, most spiritual healers do both contact healing and healing without contact. Some resistance factors are common to both methods. Others are peculiar to either one or the other method only. Obviously, if you're healing someone at a distance, the fact that you don't have your hands on them makes it different from the person you're healing by putting your hands on them. So the resistance factors can be divided into two classes, physical and non-physical. By physical we mean such things as the natural environment, cleanliness, heat, humidity, comfort, anything else that affects the physical senses. The non-physical factors are numerous and often mysterious. Some of these can be coded by the word mental, including such items as worry, fear, hate, adversity, hostility, irritation, embarrassment, guilt complexes, feeling of unworthiness, doubt, and occasionally the desire to remain sick. Some people can only get attention by being sick. Why should they desire to be well? The more mysterious non-physical factors may in some cases be physical, but do not affect the physical senses in the normal way. Among these are radio and television waves, cosmic rays, thought waves, electrical fields, magnetic fields, the dynamic radiations from living plants, animals, and humans, the coupling effect when certain waves cause interference patterns, and the resulting propagation of complex waves in the biomagnetic fields of healer and healee. The healer meditates and treats individuals separately when healing on the individual level. He tunes into the individual. This may appear to be a formidable task, considering all the resistance conditions involved. But if the healer will recognize the image of God within himself, the image of God in the healee, and can say with conviction, the Father and I are one, the healer and I are one, the harmony of health exists in the Father and in his image, therefore health can be manifested in all levels of being, and resistance to the flow of healing current is reduced to a minimum. Depends how you think. By thinking in this manner, he will be creating those conditions most favorable to spiritual healing. In other words, the healer should recognize the full capabilities of the supreme intelligence inherent in the individual. Cooperate with it by not interfering with its operation, leaving both himself and the healee as passive elements in the healing circuit. In this way, resistance is reduced to a minimum. It is of interest to review some of the findings resulting from certain scientific experiments which indicate the real effect of some energies which to many people would not have the remotest connection with healing conditions. It can be demonstrated that audio sound waves produce different wave patterns when transmitted through inert objects of identical size and shape, but of different materials such as various kinds of metals or woods. The transmission of sound waves through a living body produces different waveforms in health from those transmitted through disease structures. Muscular dystrophy, for instance, produces a pattern entirely different from arthritis. They do this by passing sound waves through the body, and on the oscilloscope you see the waveform. It is different for different diseases. When sound waves were transmitted through fresh animal flesh, a living plant, and the human body in separate experiments, it was found that the waveforms were different under various light conditions, such as darkness, blue light, and daylight. Now you've got two electrodes on a person's arm or leg, and you're passing sound waves through it. Would you believe that those waves would give a different pattern just because you change the light, color of the light, or the intensity? But it does. Under the influence of different types of music, and in the absence of music, different sound wave patterns are transmitted through the human body. Now, you know the dentist puts this earphone business on you and he plays sweet music while he drills the teeth. Maybe the sound waves from the drill are changed by the fact that you listen to that music. And it has been proved in the laboratory that this is so. As a person concentrates his attention on different works of art, the sound wave patterns through his body change as he switches his attention from one artwork to another. When you look over here at a picture of Jesus or some saint, and you get a certain wave pattern. Nothing else changes, but you turn around and you look over here at a stormy sea. You get an entirely different wave pattern through the structure. Different tensions are involved. Very interesting. Here's another very strange thing. Sound wave patterns transmitted through the subject's body showed patterns different from normal when the photograph of the subject was irradiated at different times with yellow light, ultraviolet light, and strobo flashlight. Histograms taken before and after irradiation of the photograph indicate that there was a transfer of energy to the subject that remained after the photograph was irradiated. The photograph's 40 miles away at the end. Now, the presence of a healer has a lasting effect on the healee when the healer blesses the healee. Histograms taken before, during, and after the visits of healers show different wave patterns through the subject bodies. A yogi, a doctor, and priests of different denominations participated in these experiments. The priest comes into the room and he blesses the patient, and the whole pattern changes on the waveform. Not only that, after they leave, there's a difference in the change in pattern. It's had a permanent effect on the person. So we don't know what all the conditions are that are affecting us. A lot of us have got our photographs hanging up all over the place. Ours are in newspapers, magazines. What kind of light is playing on them? What strange connections are there between the photographs and us? Who knows? How can you block them out? We don't know. But we know from the experiments in laboratories that remote effects on photographs affect the patient. The best we can do then is to provide the best conditions possible by focusing the mind upon the Supreme Being, or your highest conception of the Supreme Being, being clean, relaxed, and expectant, and hope that the spiritual power will flow and perform a cure. Thank you.
How about taking just 5 minutes?
Now here I was all relaxed and now I'm tense again. Now what they want to know is, how do you get into the past tense condition? Oh, you tried to take all the fun out of my joke. Well, tension is a way of life with most of us. If you go to the Orient, they're not near as tense as they are here because they've got more sense. They're not chasing after the things which have so little value so much as we chase after them. So we all have a certain amount of tension. You can get rid of tension, first of all, by getting it out of your muscular system, by directing the muscles of the body to relax, starting with your toes. Lie down, wiggle your toes and say relax. Flick your ankles and say relax. And go all the way up until you even roll your eyes and wiggle your tongue. By the end of each action you say relax. Of course you're usually fast asleep before you get up that high. But that's one way to do it. And you can do it, you can practice it any time. If you're in a very tense position in business, I've been in those positions many times, I would just start wiggling my toes and start relaxing. And the fellow across the other side of the table, by this time has got 3 cigarettes going at the same time. And I know he's tense because I can see it. And I found that this was a good way to relax. Do it first through the muscles. And the very fact that your mind is being used to relax muscles tends to relax the whole system, mentally and otherwise. You have to do something about it, in other words. Histogram. A histogram is a line drawn on a chart that gives the history of a certain condition. Oh, you can get cooked with these high frequency waves, and nothing to fool around with. You better know what you're doing. It has possibilities though, and we have set up in Atlanta, Georgia, it's another scientific group, experiments with the clearing camera, in which we are able to see emanations from the face and the hands of people. Just got some slides of that just yesterday. However, we're looking for the aura, and I'm sure that what we have gotten is nothing but the heat emanations from the body. Well, at least it shows it on the slides. It shows something emanating from the body.
So that the camera is able to detect the emanations.
I think the changes in the waveform as a result of the application of various forces like music, pictures, lights, changes the density of the structure of the body by changing the tension in the body. This is what I think causes the change in the waveform, but I'm not sure of this. Nobody knows exactly what the change is that takes place. We only know that changes do take place. just like a priest being in the room and blessing the person. There's a change in the pattern.
Well, you know that religion is another point. Among the Orthodox beliefs, that's another point. Among the Orthodox beliefs, they bless water. And our doctors and our scientists have discovered this water that has been blessed through prayer and a priest chanting is free of all bacteria. What happened? They kept the water for years and still without bacteria. And you know that if you keep water for 2 weeks, what happens to it? So what happens when they pray over that water? What forces will God display?
I treated some water in a laboratory, it's pure distilled water, and its electrical conductivity increased 8%. They poured some of it into a pipe plate, and over the pipe plate they placed some special photographic film which is sensitive only in the high ultraviolet range, and the photographic scientist said that there would be nothing on the film, but when they developed the film they had a photograph of the pipe plate. In other words, something had been imparted to this pure distilled water that gave it the quality of affecting this special emotion on this film. These are just experiments we're working with. We don't know anything about it yet. We just get results. I think what I probably said was that I believe there was, parallel to the normal electromagnetic spectrum, another type of spectrum which is on a spiritual level, which has qualities different from the electromagnetic spectrum. This, I think, is in the same state of comparative knowledge as matter and contra-terrene matter or antimatter. Antimatter is something which science knows exists. But we don't see it or feel it or register it, but they know mathematically that it has to exist. It's essential to matter, and yet they call it antimatter or contra-terrene matter. We know little about it, but we're working on it. Just give it a little hope.
This will conclude our fourth session. We want to tell you how much we really enjoy sharing our experiences with you, and I hope you get learn from this much. Don't forget that we have a new life clinic, and that our beloved Sir Lawrence is our co-worker, and Dr. Kirkley is, of course, the minister of this church, and once in a while I come in. But come and join us every Thursday morning. You are free to do that. Otherwise, notice every night at 9 o'clock, but your prayers will certainly help someone along the way. And now I hope that sometime we'll again meet, and until that time, may God's richest blessing is guarding you walking with you.
I'd like to just say one little thing, because I know we have at least one person who is poetically inclined present. And this has to do with anyone who feels desirous of communicating with departed souls. And I would refer them to Tennyson's In Memoriam. And I will quote the part that I think is appropriate. How pure in heart and sound in head, with what divine affections bold, should be the man whose thoughts would hold an hour's communion with the dead. In vain shalt thou or any call the spirits from their golden day, except like them thou too can say, my spirit is at peace with all. They haunt the silence of the breast, imagination calm and fair, the memory like a cloudless air, and the conscience as a sea at rest. But when the heart is full of din, and doubt beside the portal waits, they can but listen at the gates, and hear the household jar within. Did I quote it right?
This is the end of Lecture 4 of a series of 4 lectures on a seminar on the gifts of the Spirit by Ambrose Worrall. The date of this lecture, this last lecture, was January the 30th, 1972. Just a few days later, on February the 2nd, 1972, Ambrose Worrall passed into spirit. His earthly healing ministry ended, Ambrose continues his work from the spirit realm.